Thursday Facebook Live. Hopefully everything will work. Hi, welcome to the first Thursday Facebook Live. Hoping that everything will work well tonight. So tonight we're just going to talk about some tips and tools to build a better bridge from where you are now to where you want to be. And these tips are based on questions and issues that parents bring up. And so I'm going to just give some answers to some common questions that I get, things that happen often. So you may recognize some of these questions and ideas you might have heard before. So how do I keep from getting into arguments with my child is the first question. She's 9 years old and loves to draw me into a power struggle. So if you want to stop arguing with your child, you're going to need to refuse to argue. And it sounds really simple, but it is not easy to avoid arguing with a child that continues to push for more words. They want to get the last word. They want to be they want to control every part of the situation, the conversation. They want to get you to get engaged into it. So kids will say a lot of things to try to get you to, engage. But if you got to keep in mind where your child is, first of all, on that mountain of escalation, and recognize that no matter how much you want to make them understand what you're saying or acknowledge what you're saying, that they're probably not at a level where they're really going to get that from what you're doing and saying. That it's not going to be a healthy debate. They're not going to come to an understanding, especially if you start feeling like you're kind of climbing on that mountain of escalation too. So you're going to want to keep your words clear and concise and stay, really, really simple. Even if you think this is the time I'm going to say this the right way and they're going to listen, they're going to get it, they probably aren't. So you just have to refuse to engage in that in an argument, a senseless argument. It's not going to get you what you want. The other thing that is really helpful is to stay really focused on what it is you said at the beginning and get more simple. So use less words, get more simple. So for example, if you feel the child's pushing you into an argument, you might hold up your hand and say, we can talk about this later. We're not going to go into that right now. I'm not going to talk about that right now. First you need to get calm, or first we're going to finish unloading the dishwasher, whatever it was that you first said. And so, don't add more words like, we're going to do this because, or I'm not going to talk to you right now because, all these reasons, they're not rational, they're not reasoning. So, no more responding, and you can be very quiet. I've seen a lot of kids, it's like they kind of pick at something, they'll get one phrase, they'll say over and over. You can just be quiet. You don't have to keep arguing. They'll work through it. I also encourage you to think about it as a tug of war. And when you're giving words, you're pulling on your side to try to sway them to your side. They're trying to sway you to theirs. And this tug of war that even it's just not going to go well. So you want to just let go of that and come around the child in a different way. So that's the best way to avoid an argument, is to refuse to argue. So, and I would just want to caution you on that too, because if you just ignore them, like, don't say anything, and walk away, that's not going to help when they're very escalated, because they're going to do the thing that gets you to come back, whether it's punch a hole in the wall or throw something at you or hurt somebody, or they may say something really hurtful, which I'm less worried about when they're escalated, because we can come around that later. But so it's not you don't want to add fuel to their fire. You want to let go of that rope, but you want to come around them in a different way. So you're going to still be there physically. You're going to be engaged enough to be able to say, what it was the first thing you wanted. When you're finished, then we'll go do this, or whatever that is. Don't just walk away and ignore it. There can be times if they're when we're standing by a child's door waiting and they're just saying things, screaming things, yelling things. Sometimes we will say, I'm right here. I'm going to close the door. I'm going to wait until you're done. Or you can even say, I'll be back in 5 minutes to check on you, so, but if they're very escalated and they're going to do something that's going to be destructive or hurt themselves or hurt you, you just want to be really careful about leaving them to do more damage. And that's what happens sometimes when we leave kids to themselves. They tend to get even more lost. So you want to be there, be engaged, but not engage in the argument. So here's another one that came up. Sometimes things are there's so many things that we need to fix or get better at as parents that I don't even know where to start. So I understand that it can be really overwhelming. You can feel like, gosh, there's like all these things that you're trying to work on as a parent to get better at. There may be all these things that you want the child to get better at. So I just recommend that you work on one main thing at a time, especially if you're early in the program or you're going back to the basics. Just pick one or two things. Yes, mom. Yes, dad. Today we're going to work on giving good responses. You might even tell yourself, today I'm going to work on using the words from the mantras. We're going to work on having the schedule today, or I'm going to work on having the child stay close to me today. So it's okay to be focused on one or two things and not try to do everything at once. And sometimes we do the opposite, like things are going well, so then we start, well, let's work on this and this and this, and we add too many things. So it's okay to just focus on a couple of things. Pick one goal each week, get really proficient at that, and build new habits. And it takes a lot of practice and a lot of repetitiveness on our side to learn our new habits and how we're going to relate with our kids and interact, but also on their side too. So, yeah, don't be in a rush to try to solve everything at once. Even when it feels like everything's happening at once, you can pause and just work on one thing at a time. So, what about all the complaining? My 14-year-old complains or wants to talk to try to convince us to do what he wants us to do. So here's an idea. I think this is great for 14-year-olds. Get a notebook, tell your child, your son or your daughter, all complaints must be in writing, and have them write it down. It's like, I want to hear what you have to say, but I need to have that in writing. So have them write their complaints down. Most kids don't want to write, but the ones that do will write things that you'll treasure for years later. I still have my notebook of complaints from my kids when they were that age, and it is pretty funny to look at now. But a lot of your kids don't want to write, and so this can be really helpful. So just keep it simple. Just tell them all complaints must be in writing. I can't listen to that right now, but I want to hear you. And all arguments can be in writing too. And so an argument, I'm looking at it as I'm teaching them how to write a persuasive argument paper. So they want something, they want to try to convince you, they want to tell you, they want to do something different on the schedule. Have a place where they can write those ideas down. So that just seems to help a lot to, be able to diffuse some of that by having them put those things in writing. So what about arguing about doing chores? All the I don't want to, and why do we have to do this, and I did that yesterday, and I do all the work around here, all of those kind of arguments. So in the Healthy Foundations family program, the kids, they will have chores and activities as a part of daily family life. And if you're having a lot of problems with chores, then go back to doing those things together. That's the number one key in getting more compliance and doing chores, is to do it together, to be done with a parent until the child gets much better at it and doesn't mind. I have kids that have been on the program, just a few weeks, and they're able to, like a kid today that was able to vacuum while the mom was working on the kitchen, and it's fine. But at first, you know that you might both be in the kitchen, and then you might both be where you're vacuuming. So that helps a lot to take away some of the argument when you're doing it together. And we don't force kids to do it. We can't make them do it, but you can have them stay by you while you do it, and it still will take less time than all the arguing and all the trying to convince them. And I have a lot of kids that, especially early on in the program, like they will choose, to, it's like they don't want to help. So let's say you're cleaning the bathroom. It's like, okay, you stand right here while I do this. And when you want to help, let me know. Usually that doesn't take very long. They get kind of bored. Sometimes it works really well in the kitchen because you might be putting things away and they're saying they don't want to help, but they're standing right there. And so then you're like, while you're there, could you do this? Or, you hand them something. It's like, put that over there. And pretty soon they start helping. So the being together is really the key on that. So the other thing you can do is you can say, if you are going to choose to argue, I'll set the timer and you can get this done by yourself. So if like they're with you in the kitchen doing something and they just keep pushing buttons or arguing, it's like, you work on this and I'll go over here and work on this. You can change that out for another option, such as we'll take a break until you're calm enough to continue. But really, really taking that break can be together, and then, okay, now let's go, and you have to really watch your kids that take a break and shut down and don't do anything. So if you have them moving and they can stand by you, that's fine. And sometimes it's okay. If you're emptying the dishwasher and they're not helping, but they're standing there and you're talking, or it's not an argument, it's going okay, that's beneficial too. So don't be afraid to just have them come in close and be by you. So what if they don't get a task done on time? If it's not done, don't argue. Say something like, okay, time is up for that chore, and move on. Remember, the goal is to kind of keep things moving, to spend less time arguing, less time lecturing. And so the consequences of not getting a chore done can sometimes be decided ahead of time too, if there's going to be a consequence. Like, we need to get this done in 10 minutes because we have this thing that we need to do. So if we don't get the dishes done during chore time, then we'll have to finish them before our game time. And you may have the other children starting on something that was more fun. We've done this a lot. We have some kids that will kind of be fussing and complaining and not getting things done, and then the other child's doing it maybe with another parent or did it on their own. Then they might have time to have their snack while we're still waiting with the other child. They may be able to go outside and jump on the trampoline for a few minutes before the other child gets out there, and sometimes that can really help. But making sure that whatever that consequence is, it's not like because you didn't get your chores done, then this Saturday you're not going to be able to go with us to get ice cream, is not going to work with these kids. It's got to be closely tied in. I don't like to take things away and make it a punishment because they didn't get it done. That's not going to build more compliance. What we want is them to be willing to do it. So we want the consequence to be, like, oh wow, that I should get this done quicker next time, and not I got punished because I didn't get it done. So it's also not heaping more on. I've had parents say before that, oh, you got your chore done really quickly, so now we can go do another chore, or they keep giving more things to do. If you're going to do several chores in a time frame, you need to lay that out ahead of time. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. If we get done early, then we have extra time to do something fun, or we'll have more time outside, or more time to take a walk, or whatever it is. So just be really careful that you don't, because that also takes away the motivation. If you keep giving them more, they're not going to be motivated to do it in a timely manner. But if they can learn that I work hard, work fast, get things done correctly, I get to do more of what I want to do, then that's good. So we don't want to slow them down. We want to help them to do it better and quickly. And if anybody else has questions while they're listening to this, they can write them down and leave comments as well. So, what about this one? I don't want to be rude or mean by bossing my kids around. When you say parents are in charge, isn't being in charge like being militant or bossy? No, that is not what we're talking about. We want you to be direct, but not rude. It is not rude to be clear and concise and direct. Over explaining, constantly moralizing, lecturing, you being ignored and then resorting to yelling, um, you know, having to get louder, saying something to your child 3 or 4 times, and by the time they do it, you're, like, ah, you getting exasperated and rolling your eyes, and all of that kind of stuff is way more rude than just being direct and saying, calmly and firmly, your job is to do the dishes. Please do that now. And setting the timer and the job getting done before the timer goes off is not rude. You can model being polite while being direct and being clear. So I think there's a lot worse things that we do as parents in our own frustration. I can't take my kids to the store. They always misbehave. What do I do? So before you do an activity, really, especially one that you've had problems at before, you're going to set the expectations up ahead of time. You're not going to tell them, like, every time we go to the store, you're always so bad, I don't want to take you to the store, build in a lot of the things that have happened before in that way. But you do want to set the expectations of, like, we're going to go to the store and we're going to, get these things on this list, or I have a list that we need to get things, and here's what I would like you to do. I want you to stay by the cart, and I don't want you to ask for things. If we can get done really quickly, then we'll have time on the way home to stop and get a treat. If we can't get it done, we're just going to leave, and I'll have to do this another time. But I think you can do it. And anybody have any questions? So you want to, speak what you want to have happen and what you expect to happen and what you will do if that doesn't happen. Just be really clear. It'll calm your nerves down, because if you know that if what, and I wouldn't say what always happens, but if you know, like, you can set it up, if you know that they're going to ask and beg for things and then throw a fit when you say no, then set that up ahead of time. Say, we're going to the store. I'll give you one warning if you ask for things. And if you can't handle that, or you continue, or you have a fit, we will just leave. And they're still not going to get the thing, but they also don't get to finish doing that task. And you're just going to go straight home of, nothing else. Once you get home, it's over. Do whatever it is you need to do at home, that's on your schedule to do. Don't go back and now try to punish them because you had to leave the store, because you're going to be plenty mad if you have to leave the store and don't get your shopping done. But you're going to have to deal with it in that moment by leaving and then coming home and doing what you said you were going to do, rather than trying to punish that later. So let me make sure I said everything I wanted to say about that. Yeah, don't go into all the things that they do wrong. Just stay focused on the expectations of what you want it to be. So what about when they break a rule and then fight about what the consequences are? So, they're telling you, I can't even think of one right now, but they break the rule and they fight about the consequences. So again, you're going to set those expectations ahead of time. Oh, I've got a good one. So, like, if you're going to play a game, and that they often, like, knock the cards off, or have a game that has a lot of little dots, and you're collecting the dots. So I tell the kids, if you knock the dots off the table, then whatever dots fall on the floor are going to go into the center pile. And so they know ahead of time, so they can be mindful. And then when they argue about it, when the dot falls on the floor, because they're doing that thing that they always do, fidgeting with them, then I say, the dot goes in the center. And then they have a fit, or they get mad. So the way that we handle that in a game is, I will repeat. I told you the rules at the beginning. And you can just be really clear about that. I told you the rules at the beginning. Dot goes in the middle. And if they can't handle it, you can say, okay, we'll wait. We can take a break. If they get more escalated, the game may be over. Okay, we're done. So it just don't go into all the explanations. It's like, I sometimes, even when I'm setting up the rules, will have parents, try to give more explanation. Like, she's saying this because, it's like, no, I'm saying things very clear and simple and concise. They don't need everything. They know. They know what they do. They know if it falls on the floor that it goes in the center. You don't have to explain why, or, that they always do this, or, we told you so, or whatever. Just be very calm and clear. And, the biggest thing about setting things up ahead of time is that you know what you're going to do, and that is going to help you to be so much calmer as you're moving through these activities, because know how you're going to handle it, and that just helps so much because you're not getting upset at the same time. And if you do get upset, you can fall back onto what you said you were going to do. Don't change the rules on what you said you were going to do now because you're upset. It's like, just that's it. You're kind of you got to be one and done. So don't add more onto it. I get this a lot from parents. Well, shouldn't there be more consequences if they break the rules? Like, where's the, making them pay for what they did kind of thing? So I like to keep it really simple, and I like to keep the consequences tied to whatever it is that just happened with their executive functioning and their inability to hold on to events, even if they can tell you, like, I got grounded, I can't have my phone or whatever it is because this thing that happened a week ago. They're still not really tying it in. If that's the case where you take something away, then in that moment when something happens, then they need to know how they earn that back. Because just saying I'm going to take it away until I can trust you, it's like, well, what would that look like? How are you going to know? So if it's tied in to that thing, then you have kind of that check and balance of keeping the consequence tied in with what happened. So I think that what we're really teaching our kids is cause and effect. So you chose this action, and you don't get to choose the effect of what happens from it. That's your job as the parent. So I don't think that they're really going to understand if it isn't directly tied in, as well as if it happens right there. So if this happens, then this is going to happen. If this happens, this is going to happen. So if you think about consequences, like in terms of that, you do have consequences. We all have consequences. I think sometimes we want the kids to have a better understanding of what they did and how it affected everybody else, or how it affected you, or, and so we want to kind of make them feel some pain in some way, so that they know how upset you are about it, or how important it is. But if it's not directly tied, they're not going to get it. So if you have an issue with the phone and you have to take the phone away because you can't trust them with the phone because they were looking at something inappropriate, or they were, stole it from somewhere, whatever it is, like, it needs to be directly tied to that. And so then, you have to decide, what does that look like if you're going to trust them again? So, is there a way to show for them to build that trust about the phone, in the context of where they are right now? They don't have the phone. As soon as they have it, they're going to do the same thing again that they just did. So how can they build trust, during that time frame? I'm not saying don't take the phone away. I think that's a good idea. You just may really consider what it means to get it back, because just giving them a week with no phone isn't going to change the behavior that they had on the phone in the first place. So you got to it causes some having to think about things and figure out, what you're going to do and what it's going to look like to change that behavior. How do they change it? Do you need to do something where you're putting more guards on the phone itself, or do they maybe they're just not ready for a phone, and you don't even need that right now in everything else that you're dealing with. So these are just things to kind of think about when you're trying to figure out what to do. I think that it can be really helpful of the common things that happen, to kind of make a list of when this happens, this is what happens. So, you know, and we can have positive things on there too. You know, when you are cleaning your room, you can listen to music. You know, if when you know, when you say yes, mom, then we can do such and such. You know, so you can have good things on there too, not just the poor choices. But I think we just need to show our kids like this and then this. And I think that you can't do it too much. And I don't think that the the kids that I tend to work with have a lot of issue kind of tying. I mean, I've had kids break things or knock things down or make a huge mess when they're having a fit. And then we say, okay, now that you're calm, we're going to go clean this up. And it's like they're so disengaged from what they did that they're yelling at us that we're making them clean up things and they're our slaves, you know, and things like this. When really that's just the effect, right? You chose to knock things off, or you broke this, now we have to fix it. So they get to learn that piece of it. And you're not going to over time, right? That consistency of like, when I do this, then this is what happens. So it's also, like I said, helps to have it written down so that you know, okay, this is what we said. We said that when you have a fit or you call someone a name, then you're going to take a break for 5 minutes. You know, you're going to sit on the couch, take a break. So it may take them 20 minutes to get their 5 minutes in, but that's what that's their choice. So don't waver on it. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And so then we back off and don't have them sit on the couch for 5 minutes. But we're very clear. You said, when you do this, then this is what we're going to do. This is what's going to happen, so that they start to learn. I think kids very early on learn how to get out of the consequence. And that's what makes our boundaries kind of weak, because, you know, this is great because I had a kid yesterday that was doing the same thing. It's like we would give him a choice, you know, come sit next to me, or I will hold you and have you sit next to me, or sit with me. And he's, you know, starts flailing around and kicking and, you know, yelling and, you know, definitely not choosing to sit next to mom, which is all he had to do. And so then she gets a hold of him, and now he's being, you know, sitting with her in like a safety hold, and he's yelling, I'll sit next to you, I'll sit next to you. And in the past, she would have said, oh, okay, well, let's try it again, right? And he would have done the same thing. But we just have him, nope, sorry, that choice is over. Now we're going to do it this way. So it's important to follow through with it. When they do really get calm and, you know, have worked through that, then they can apologize. Then you can get up and get a hug. You don't need to go back over it like, see, if you would have just sat next to me, you wouldn't have had to do that. You know, you said, you know, whatever, like, no, we move on. Yeah. So again, if you have any questions about any of these things, please leave a comment. So when my child wants something, he whines and sometimes screams until I give it to him. If I say no, he really freaks out. I know not to give in, but what can I do? So at first, your child may just need to learn to give a good response when you tell them to do something, and allow you as the parent to direct the day. So that's why that's a really basic thing that we do in our program, is we have a schedule, we have a routine, we have you learn how to really be direct and direct the day. So if you ask them, you know, do you want to do this? Or how about if we go do this, okay? Or what do you think about this? Then be ready for the battle, because you probably had in your mind that this is what you were going to do. So why not just say that? You know, this is what we're going to do, and that's how we're going to handle it. So they have to learn to give a good response and allow you to direct. That's the basic. And even so, you're still gonna, what we're also talking about here is they may still, when they want something, like, so maybe when you're directing, they're doing much better, but when they want something, they don't ask appropriately either. They will whine or scream or use baby talk, and it's totally fine for them to learn to say that in the proper way. So you can say, you can have them do a redo. You can say, it sounds like you're thirsty. Can you say that in a better way? Sounds like you would like an apple. How can you ask for that? And if they're not sure, you can tell them exactly what you want to say. May I have an apple, please? I'm thirsty. I would like a drink. May I use the bathroom? All of those things. May I be excused from the table? Like, give them the scripts to say, because if they could do better, they would. If they already knew it, then they would be using it. So we're going to assume that they don't know it and that they need to be retaught it. And even with teenagers, I find, because their brain is, sometimes out to lunch, they're not remembering, even just simple manners. So make sure your kids communicate in the way that you want them to communicate. And if they're in the middle of a fight and an argument, you're going to have to get calm first and then try again. Not try to, get them to do it. But sometimes also just waiting. Like, you have the apple in your hand and you're waiting, and they're like, if they get more escalated, you might have to say something. But sometimes you can just wait, and they're like, what? And it's like, I'm waiting for you. How do you ask for this? What do you need to say? Do you need help in how to ask for this? So make sure you've taught the basics of it, you know what you want them to say, and then practice it. Home is the best place to practice our manners, to practice. We do it with little kids. We teach them how to say yes, mom, please, thank you, all of those things, and then we just kind of let it go. So I found too that it also helps you as the adult to really think about how you respond when your kids say your name or ask you to look at something. Are you kind of like, or yeah, or just a minute, it's like, no, we're working on our social language skills. And so that can be really helpful for everybody to be working on that. So there was a question here. So the question was, is it a good idea to write out the consequences for bad actions beforehand for the main issues in the house? So it depends on kind of where you are in the program. Early on, we don't do that yet because we're just working on really getting those good responses and getting kind of just that simple cause and effect. Mom says to do this, I say, yes, mom. And then, or, if I have a fit, I have to be calm, and then I go. So it's very, very basic at first. So we don't write it out necessarily. But as we get further, then there may be more tools that you're trying to use. And so then you may need that list of we call it if this, then this. And we actually can help you to do that in the program, to write it out. You can be playing around with it and coming up with some ideas, but early on, and especially with younger kids, it's really pretty basic. We want our kids to, to be able to be compliant first before we have to do more. Then we can kind of see, like, okay, this is what keeps happening. So we could write some things like if they, and even at first, like, because I was thinking, if you hit your brother, this is what happens. But at first we're so structured, we're not even really allowing for that to happen. So I just don't, it kind of depends. But yeah, later as we go in the program, then that writing those behaviors, the cause and effect piece of it, this happens, then this happens, can be really helpful. We kind of do it like a chart. So if the child doesn't accept no or ask in the right way, then what do we do? So we want to encourage you to teach your child how to make a request. So again, early in the program, we don't work on this as much because we're teaching them to be compliant, really, to be able to say yes, mom, yes, dad. So I'm not wanting them to make a request yet because they're always negotiating. And this is what I find, is that your kids already know how to negotiate and how to push and push and push till they get what they want. What we're trying to teach them early on is to do what they're told, to stop, to listen, and to follow directions. And that's a really important skill before we can negotiate. But as we go forward, there are going to be times when you didn't know, like, let's say you know, the child was out of the room, putting their shoes away and they didn't get the piece of candy that their sister got, and you didn't know, then we don't want them to come in and just start screaming, I didn't get any candy, and she got candy, and all that. We want to be like able for them to be able to say, to give you more information, like, be able to say, well, I was putting my shoes away. I didn't get a piece of candy. They can say that calmly. They can say that in their big kid voice. They don't need to be screaming about it. So sometimes, if they're it's sometimes it's going to be a no, but a lot of kids, they don't want to hear no, and so they don't make a proper request. They just throw a fit right off the bat, or they say it in a way that now you're dealing with this other stuff, and so you may even give in, like, oh, okay, just take it, just stop screaming at me. It's like a pacifier. But remember, you can use phrases like, use a full sentence, please, try again with kind words, you need to take a breath, I don't know what you're talking about, slow down, tell me again, what are you asking for? Getting them to slow down, pause, say it, we have plenty of time, it's going to be okay. And I really think that once they start to see that we're slowed down enough, that we're listening to what they're saying, when they can do that in a way that's correct, then that can really help. So you can work on that. Some kids will react in nonverbal ways too, refusing to use full words and full sentences, saying part of something. So if you're getting, like if you're getting ready to do something and a child doesn't want to do it, like let's say you're doing box time and they're just, pouting, kind of, or some, I don't want to, or kind of giving you all the nonverbal signals that they don't want to. That's not a proper request, and it's not our job to try to figure it out. Why don't you usually like this? And we're like, why don't you like it now? What happened? What's wrong? Like, we want them to be able to say what's wrong. If they can't say it, then we have to deal with that. So they need to learn to communicate something along the lines of, like, maybe it's like, I'm tired of playing this game. Is there a different one that we can do? So if you might take a guess at it. It's like, it sounds like it looks like you don't want to play with Play-Doh. Can you tell me that? Use your words and tell me that. I don't want to play with Play-Doh. I'm tired of this Play-Doh. So then you can make it, you can help them and you can come up with a different solution. Unless, like I said, you're really early in the program and they always have a different solution, right? You say, we're going to play with Play-Doh. They say, I want to play with Legos. You say, we're going to play with Legos. They say they want to read books, So you got to know where you are in this process. If they're just always arguing, then we're not ready for this yet. But if they're ready to learn to ask, then they can tell you. So, I think it's the same thing when we're trying to get kids to tell us what's wrong. I think we can ask. You can take a guess at it. It just seems like you're tired, or it looks like you're frustrated. But then it's up to them to communicate. I would get them moving in a different direction if they're just going to be like slumped over, So, okay, well, let's do this then. We're going to go do this, and try to get your ones that just shut down and don't want to talk. You got to get them moving. This question says, why is it so hard to change their behaviors? Why can't I just make them stop? Usually by yelling at them, or like, just stop it, right? So I just want to encourage you to keep in mind that change is hard for everyone. And most of the time with our kids, we fail to acknowledge or notice even the smallest changes. So I am always surprised, like, how hard we're working on certain things, and then when the kids are starting to do it, we're not acknowledging it, right? Like, we're working really hard on them doing what we say. So we say something and we go do it right away. We want to thank them. Oh, good job. Way to go. Let's go. So doesn't have to be a big reward, but we just need to remember to sometimes thank them when they say, yes, mom. Um, it's just acknowledging it, right? It's like, wow, thank you. I'm glad. Thanks for saying that. Good job. Um, Sometimes they're doing it just because they want a reward, but that's part of why we want to just acknowledge the things that they're doing well. So notice those small changes because things are changing, and don't necessarily have to go overboard in noticing it, but I think you can go a long ways. Or, wow, that was really great. At the end of the day, just like, I'm just so impressed because you had such a good afternoon today and everything went so well. And you know, and let that be enough. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you did, you know, what I said, and so now I'm gonna, I one parent that was like always wanting to pay their kids, for the stuff that they did. It's like, no, like these are just normal things that we want to build that intrinsic, this is relationships work better when we do this, and we want that to be good. Um, so noticing those small changes, but also remember as adults, like we get stressed and we get depressed and we get anxious, and we have our our problems, and to make changes in for us to make changes is really hard, and yet we kind of expect kids to just, stop doing things that they've maybe spent years building the habits to do, whether it's whining, throwing a fit, arguing. This is their habit. This is their go-to when they get stressed, when they get anxious. Anger is their go-to. This is what they do. So just realizing that if how difficult it is for us to change things, and that's when we want to, right? Like, we only change things because we have to or we want to, right? Like, it's not working for us, so we have to change the way we do this at a job or with other people or in our relationships but there's some, like, it's still up to us, right? Our kids, they don't have the same buy-in, right? Because first of all, they're not aware of how they're just they're just there, and their reaction is their reaction. They're not thinking about, like, if I have this reaction, it might hurt somebody's feelings, and you're gonna always be there for them anyway, so they're not, then that's important for them to know that, but it doesn't make it like you better change or else is like, what's the or else, so just realizing that it's difficult, and so the changes happen in the way that we interact, but it also, I look at it like the us wanting them to change is like we put this pressure on them, and the change, when they start to change, then it releases. So this is going to sound kind of strange talking about kids, but I'm going to use a dog training analogy. So if I'm training my dog to walk on a loose leash and not pull on the leash, so they're pulling and pulling and pulling on the leash, and that's pressure on the collar. And I can punish them by like jerking the leash, or I can try to hold them really tight, and then they're going to have that pressure all the time. But I can also teach my dog, if I stop, and then when the dog turn, like, because they want to go forward and we're not going anywhere, and so that's keeping pressure. When they give in, when they turn towards me or loosen up on that leash, then I can be like, wow, good job, and then we walk. So it releases that pressure. So it's kind of like that with our kids. Like, the release of pressure is that things start going better. We're not having to spend an hour getting calm, or even 20 minutes. Like, we're able to come and sit down and take a break, or spend a minute getting ourselves together, or doing what mom said and going and washing our hands, or so it's like we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but we're kind of making the right thing easier and making the wrong things, the wrong choices, the more difficult and not as easy. It's like, it's going to take as long as it takes can mean a lot of different things, right? So so that's why we don't just like try to like just get the kids to, like, yelling at them to stop all the time. Like, that's why I will have you tell them what you want them to do in the positive. So instead of stop wiggling, stop moving, stop moving your legs, or stop kicking the chair, what do you want them to do? Go sit down, stand here, keep your legs still, be directive in it, because they're not a lot of times even aware of what they're doing. There are going to be times when, you reach over and put your hand on them and you get them to stop thumping the table or whatever, and that's okay. But I'm just talking about how much time we spend as parents telling our kids, stop, don't, quit. Especially your kids with ADHD, they hear this all day long in the classroom, everywhere. Stop talking, sit still, all of these kind of things. So we want to be really clear about what the behavior is that we want, and that's what we're working towards, and realize that it's going to take, it's repetitive and it takes time. So saying yes, mom and dad might seem really silly or seem even kind of demanding and may feel like it doesn't relate at all to what we're doing, but it's those little changes that start to make the difference in your home and start affecting the behaviors and creating more of a calm. So, yeah, I hope that helps. Lastly, I just wanted to say that I want you to keep in mind, and you'll kind of see this, in the answers of these questions. They're very similar answers, because what we're really keeping in mind is the kind of relationships that we want with our children, and what we're building towards, and what we're working towards. So as kids learn to listen and follow directions, then there's less anxiety and more happiness. The chaos is lowered. Families are able to do more together, and I think the kids feel that too. It's like, wow, we're having fun together. Like, oh, it's enjoyable. I remember this family I worked with during COVID. The younger son was the one that was the reason why we were doing the program, and the older boy was in high school, and we were modifying some things for him so that he didn't have to like quit baseball and some things like that, but we wanted him to still be a part of what was happening in the family. And then COVID happened, and so he had to be home. And he said, I'm so glad that we were doing this program, because who would have known that the highlight of my day every day would be the family playing family games, and so I think, he really did, like, even when they could go do things, like being home and playing a family game wasn't the worst thing in the world. It became enjoyable, and it was fun. And it's more fun to be around each other when we're not all, mad and fighting and having these problems. And you might not be there yet, but you'll get there, and that's kind of what, just keeping in mind what you're working towards. So it is a lot of little steps in the same direction, a lot of little processes that you have to work through that make changes, and those small things are the tipping points of what the big changes are, and it may take someone else even noticing it. You might take your kids somewhere where, like I've had kids that, their grandparents haven't seen them, in a few weeks because they've been doing the program, and then they're just like, wow, they're so different. We just recently had a boy that we'd been working with for quite a while, and he had been out of school because he was having so many problems at school too. And then he just started going back to school a few weeks ago, and the principal said, this isn't even the same kid that you sent back. Like, he's just doing great. Before, the principal had to be one-on-one with this kid for good parts of the day. So the changes happen. They don't always happen as fast as we want, but they do happen. Okay, this is a good one. So somebody said, what would you do when your 12-year-old says you're not the boss, you're not in charge anyways? So some questions don't need answers. And a 12-year-old telling a parent that they're not the boss, is one of the reasons why we have the mantras written down. You don't necessarily have to answer that. You just have to know that you are in charge. You are the boss. Even if it's an adoptive situation, I have kids all the time, they're adopted, tell me they're not my mom. I don't have to say that. Sometimes just other things aren't going to happen until we say that. So you knowing that you're the boss, like, you can just say parents are in charge, or adults are in charge. The police will even tell them that adults are in charge. So the other thing is, and I don't, in the argument, I don't know that you necessarily want to address this, but the more out of control that we are in society or in our homes or of ourselves, the more we need someone else to be in control. So if this If your 12-year-old wants to be in charge, they've got to show you that they can handle it. And when they're going crazy and breaking things and being destructive and running all over and causing chaos and mayhem, they they they're not even in charge of themselves. So, okay, if you don't want me to be in charge, you show me you can handle it. And that's not something I would say in the argument because it's going to add fuel to the fire and give them more to fight with you about. So if this is being said in the middle of an argument when you're saying you need to say yes, mom, well, I don't have to say yes, mom, because you're not my mom. You're not in charge of me. You're not the boss of me. Don't argue with that. Those are senseless arguments. They're just, we call them word salads, right? They're not going to go anywhere. So, but there's other times when you can, remind them of those lessons. Oh yeah, so I've got somebody saying that, yeah, they get that because they're the grandma. And so that's where I would switch it to adults are in charge. So even, and the thing is we all have people that are bosses of us, and yes, we learn to have our own autonomy and our definitely our own agency. But if I'm out of control, if I'm not in control of myself, somebody's going to take charge of me. That's what the laws are there for, right? And the consequences of breaking the laws. So I can be a good citizen and not have to deal with that, or I can go crazy and and then someone's going to be in charge. Any other questions? Someone asked before about giving some examples of setting expectations. And so setting the expectations, just a reminder, that needs to be done before the activity. And I really like, especially early on when you're doing things that you've done before, but you want them to go a different way than they've gone before. I would do it every time. Like I still do it with the kids before we play a game, things like that. You state the plan and the expectations of what will happen if it doesn't go well. And it's not a threat. It's not a bribe. It's just this is what I expect. This is what we're gonna do. So here's an example. We're gonna have a snack. The choices for the snack are on the table. And I don't want this. This isn't what I want. I don't like any of these snacks. Then you just say, if you don't want any of these choices, you don't have to eat. I do expect that you're going to sit at the table with us during snack time. Please don't ask for anything else. The answer will be no. If you don't want to eat, it's okay. We'll eat again for dinner, and we'll eat in 2 hours at dinner time. So you can, if you always have a fight at snack time, you can eliminate that struggle by being really clear. Here's the snacks. These are the choices. Don't ask for anything else. If you don't want any of these, that's fine. We'll just sit at the table and do our snack and chat. So be really clear about that, that they don't have to eat, they're not being forced, and you're not going to give in. Because what they're used to is you giving in. Because their ideas are so reasonable, right? Like, who's going to refuse a kid that they would rather have carrots than the stuff that you put on the table, or, whatever else. So they go over to the refrigerator and look, and all these things, like, it's mostly just that they don't want to have the two choices. So you can help. If they really can't decide, then you can say, this is what we're going to do. But with snacks, we don't force them to eat. Dinner, sometimes I've had some kids with some real food issues, and so we have peanut butter and bread on the table at like dinner and the meal times, and the kids can definitely choose to not have a snack, but at dinner, if they're not going to eat the dinner, they can have the peanut butter sandwich. Nothing else sweet in it. Just peanut butter and bread, just so they get some protein. Something like that. So I don't think they should have a whole separate meal. I know sometimes there's a little variance. That's fine. But I'm talking about kids that really struggle with the food issues, and being careful that you're not just getting sucked into that kind of power struggle too. Sometimes it's just to have a fit about something. So set those expectations up ahead of time of what it's going to be. Um, I've done this also with playing games. And so here's another example. We're going to play this family game. I'm just going to tell you ahead of time, someone's going to lose, someone's going to win. So this is for your kids that have a fit when they're not winning. It's okay. We're not going to have any prizes. We're playing this game to work on how we treat each other and how we can encourage each other. When the game is over, we'll put it all away after we congratulate the winner. So if you don't win, it's okay. We're going to just congratulate him and then we're going to finish. So if you get frustrated or upset during the game, we'll wait for you and then continue. But if you really can't handle it, we'll stop the game and you'll take a break over here on the couch while we finish. And then you can also make sure they know the rules. We're clear on the rules, especially if we're playing a game outside like basketball or something like that. I'll have the kids define what the rules are ahead of time so that we all know, because the rules change as we're playing if the kids are in charge of the rules. So yeah, so I think just setting that up ahead of time. So if somebody asked if they're being too physically aggressive and they need to be removed like to their room for the safety of others, is there a good way to do that safely? Yes, there is ways to move kids safely. I get concerned if everybody's in one room and the child's going to their room, and then whether you're going to stay there or not is going to make a big difference on the safety. Because if you just leave them in the room, they're going to get more aggressive, especially if they're already aggressive. I teach how to move kids safely. If you're having to so we use Handle with Care, and with Handle with Care, they don't want us to be transporting kids if they're fighting the whole time. So we would do a safety hold or some kind of containment there. It's very difficult to safely move kids like down a hallway without more things happening, basically. So sometimes just the that you're not going to be able to do it, and you're going to have to do some other kind of safety. I can't really explain how to do that on the internet because it takes a lot of training to know how to do that. So there are times when I will hold a child until they can be calm enough to walk, but I will still kind of have a hold of them. If you have kids that are really big, you're not going to be able to, you put your hands on them, they're going to escalate more because they know they can overpower you. So that's where we kind of work with you on where you are and how you're creating kind of a containment in a different way. Ultimately, you're if you don't have any safety training and you don't have the ability to safely contain your child, then your crisis plan may include that you have to call a neighbor or you have to call the police or somebody for help, for backup. So on the mountain of escalation, when they are at the top and things are happening and they're not in their right mind, you have to know what your plan is going to be for that. I had one mom that had 3 kids, and when the one daughter would start to ramp up, she had a neighbor that she could call that would come get the other 2 kids. And sometimes that's what you need to do too, is get everybody else out of the way. Like your more calm kids can go sit on the couch or can go to their rooms while you're dealing with the more aggressive kid. If they're being aggressive and destructive and you haven't had the safety training and you haven't done the program, then you got to look at what your options are, and it may be that you have to call the police. And even though the police may come out and get there when they're calm, we've had numerous conversations with the police about what they want us to do, and because they will not necessarily haul your kid away, even though sometimes I think that would be an interesting effect, the kid should maybe have, unless somebody's actually been hurt or unless you are going to press charges. And so the kid may already be calm and the police may just lecture them, or calm them down, which doesn't feel effective to us. Like that's not necessarily what we wanted. But when I've asked the police, what do you want us to do? Because especially if they're acting like, why are you calling us? It's like, what do you want us to do when they're doing these things? And I tell the police exactly what they were doing. They were yelling, they were calling names, and not just like, oh, you're stupid or whatever, but like I'll tell them what the names were. It was scaring the other children. They've broken this, they've done this, like let them know, and and let the police talk to them and tell them. But the police have told us over and over, no, we want you to call, like you have to call. And at some point you may have to be the one that presses the charges so that more happens and it's on, in the works to get the extra help that you need. So that's, you got to know what your crisis plan is. I think it still helps, especially with really big and aggressive kids, to know what you're going to do when it reaches that limit, because that will help you as a parent too. That you're not threatening that you're going to call. It's like, this happened, I'm calling. So for your kids, it would be really helpful to make that list of, when this happens, this is what I'm going to do, so that you can deal with that. Any other questions? It's been great going over these. This will be, this is recorded, so it'll be